I would like to spend a little bit more time going through the impromptu speech feedback form. And I would like to do this not because you're receiving a grade for this, obviously you're not, but because this evaluation form and others like it attend us to the particulars that are operating within a speech. I think one of the great things that comes from speech analysis and how it helps you become a better public speaker is you are able to sort of crack open communication to see what's going on, how these bits and pieces are interrelating. So I run a speaking tutoring center here at the University of Washington, and I'll get good speakers to come in and become tutors. And they become significantly better speakers by watching and analyzing and critiquing other speeches, not simply by speaking themselves, because what they're being asked to do is look at a situation, identify what's going wrong, and then be also thinking about how to get out of that problem. So it's just it's a good way of exposing yourself to a wider range of speeches and thus improving your own speech repertoire. So what I'd like to do now is take a look at some sample speeches. So in this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to have you take a look at a speech that's not particularly good. Now the speaker in this, Landon, is a good speaker, and we'll watch his speech as it was performed in a better way in a bit. But right now we're going to look at an earlier draft, one where we're sort of manipulating certain variables so it's not as good as it could be. So I want you to take a look at this, look at that evaluation form, and then at the end of his speech, I'll go ahead and walk through and we can talk about specifically what's going on in that speech. So let's go ahead and take a look at Landon's rough speech now.
I strongly agree that a good teacher is almost always a good public speaker. It's important for a teacher to be able to speak well, and being a student with a good teacher who can speak, effectively is good for the student as well. Teachers who speak well are easier to follow along as a student, and we can do much better as students because of that, which makes them those good teachers with good public speaking skills. First, a good teacher, works well with people listening. Students can get the concepts, and because they're able to get those concepts, they can do much better in the classes. It's far more likely for a student to follow along. It's a function of how well that teacher is doing, how good they are, for the students to be able to follow along better, that ability for those students to get those concepts. Now, second, it's the good teachers who are good at speaking well, so it's generally easier to follow along with them because of that. Your excellent teachers out there are the ones that are easy to take notes from, and kind of on the flip side of all of that is that your bad teachers in a lot of cases are harder to take notes from. And so when you come back and look at it as a student, you're just not as likely to do well in those classes where you have those teachers who simply aren't as good at public speaking. It makes it so much easier for the students to have good teachers who are good at speaking well, which is why I believe a good teacher is almost always a good public speaker.
In watching that, I think one thing that really stands out is there's some significant arrangement and support issues there, some problems there. So if we move, I've got my flow here, if we move from top to bottom, right, we're starting off in that introduction. Teachers typically are good at public speaking, right? That's clear enough, and he's probably because he's signaling it as this is the prompt that I pulled. There's a very unclear preview. And in fact, there's a fair bit of circular reasoning and circular talk in that introduction before he jumps into that first main point. So then we get into the first main point, which, as far as we can best tell, is phrased as teachers work well with people listening. Good public speakers work well with people listening. And so he's got some sort of unclear discussion around that. He's got two separate examples under that, his 1A and his 1B, but they're the same thing. So he's in essence saying in his 1A that good speakers as good public speakers are easier to follow along with as a student, so they're easier to take notes with. But then that's basically the exact same thing that he says in his 1B. So those two examples are not distinct from one another, right? Ideally, you would want your two examples to sort of balance each other out, or at least each is doing its job in advancing that claim that you have. So then he does that in point 1, and as far as I could tell, there is no point 2. The speech just sort of ends, and it came very much as a surprise to me. And the delivery needed to deliver the chunks, the main points, the subpoints, those pieces of evidence as chunks. They needed to have sort of a cohesiveness to them. And they were very much sort of spread out. So overall, there wasn't this sense of, oh, we're in 1A right now, and now we're moving over to 1B. Instead, it was just this sort of big mass of talk. So if I'm going through my evaluation form, the main points, gosh, it's hard to gauge because there's one there and then the second one's not really there, but probably somewhere between that, satisfactory and poor. The support, yeah, that's pretty poor. There's not a lot of independent support there. The examples that we do have are the same, and they're very vaguely discussed. There's not a lot of context and detail to them. Arrangement, well, I knew kind of when he shifted from his 1A to his 1B, but we didn't have a limited resource. I knew when he was in his point 1. We don't have a point 2 to go off of there, but I don't know, again, somewhere between satisfactory and poor. Delivery, not too bad, right? There was some good delivery there. I would say there's some lower energy, and we'll see certainly in his second one a much higher level of energy, but the delivery is not necessarily the misfiring element here. Rather, it is invention and arrangement that's really kind of needing more support.